difficult to speak after István, who basically ate my old bread. So no, I really don't want to echo his words, but these were basically my points. That happens when someone is not communicating with organizers. So you know, it's really, again, HCLU is, first of all, a Hungarian watchdog NGO. From our perspective, there are at least 5 points from where one can evaluate the success or the failure of the Hungarian presidency. The first is again pretty obvious. Did Hungary, if a presidency opens a window for increasing the knowledge on the country and making better a country's image, if that's a window, I'm afraid to say that Hungary did not use that window of opportunity. The attention was raising towards Hungary starting from 2010 summer, 10 constitutional modifications, many of them in just literally in few hours. At the fall, the privatization of the nationalization of the private pension funds, also the constitutional debate on which we could have another conference. All this was raising attention towards Hungary, but I think the government a bit underestimated the significance of the presidency in terms of coverage and attention. And all this blew up with the media law, about which we will have even another session today. So the beginning was, I believe, it was really not the type of beginning what the government dreamt about. You might remember all the articles, the protests on this issue. After 6 months, I don't think that mistake was corrected. I don't think the country's image got better in Brussels and in EU circles. You know, but to really evaluate this, we might ask some Hungarian journalists living in Brussels, how does it feel to be a Hungarian journalist and working with EU institutions? Their experience, according to the people I speak with, is pretty, is really quite frustrating. The second point of evaluation or aspect could be the diplomatic successes or failures. I mean, István mentioned that from inside, in February, when the Eastern Partnership top meeting was cancelled, it was really difficult not to see that as a major diplomatic failure, especially because of the obscure explanations of the postponement. You know, again, I might oversee something, but from our perspective, this was a presidency without any major top-level meeting, of which people of the citizens of the European Union will remember Hungary. That's pretty difficult to see this as a success. You know, what kind of, another aspect would be what kind of joint initiatives are started were started under the Hungarian presidency. We will have another session on the topic of the Roma. The reason I mention this because today, if you read the Hungarian press, especially this week, that you will have the feeling that the government considers the most important success of the presidency the adoption of the joint European Roma strategy. Again, I don't want to talk about it too much, but this is something we work on very closely. And from our perspective, I must tell you that at the moment, the joint strategy looks like a value because from a communication perspective, it might be very clever from the government that they choose this topic and they choose that they decided to Hungary and pretend as the engine of the integration of the Roma. If you look the inner picture, if you look how the country, law enforcement agencies, administration, and every level of the society treats all fellow Roma citizens, it's a joke that Hungary is serving as an engine of the European integration of the Roma. On the week when the strategy was adopted, it was made public that the government plan to increase, to start new jobs is basically a huge public employment program with terrible symbolistic and with really almost unacceptable messages. I don't want to bore you with details, but at the moment it looks like that Roma will be employed in huge public employment projects for about 200 euro per month, and will be supervised, their work will be supervised by, at the moment, retired police officers who will be forced to go back to work and act like work supervisors of this reconstruction project. These people will live, in many cases, will live hundreds of kilometers from their home, in barrack homes. You know, if that's integration of the Roma, then I think all of you should seriously scrutinize, what is really the seriousness of the European joint Roma strategy. Another point, very important, if a presidency gives an opportunity to increase support for European institutions and the whole concept of the Union, then I'm afraid that in respect, the government did not fulfill its task, if that was the task. I really don't want to underestimate the significance of a prime minister who is, a prime minister of a country which serves as the president of the Union, and on the national holiday, 15th of March, I'm talking about, in front of paid supporters, because this is what happened, is comparing Brussels to Vienna of the Austrian-Hungarian monarchy and Moscow. I mean, what kind of message it is for Hungarians? If you put aside what kind of message this sends to Brussels, what kind of message this sends to Hungarians while we are giving, while we are serving in this important position. And then maybe there is a fifth point to evaluate the presidency, and that's the perspective of Brussels. Maybe it's a cliche, but this is something we were forced, at least the Hungarian human rights community was forced to learn quite painfully in the past few months. Again, I don't want to offend anybody, but in the past 6 months, in many cases it looked like the Union would be a club which could be very picky when it's about new members, but sometimes powerless when it's about existing members. What I'm talking about, you consider a candidate country right now with a media regulation, what Hungary has adopted. Consider a candidate country with a constitution so problematic, adopted with such a problematic process, and it was the case in Hungary. Total lack of transparency, total lack of public participation, one party, totally one-sided document. I mean, no way that candidate country could consider its membership seriously. And yet, Hungary is a member. Honestly, after the European Commission's intervention on the media law, the law did not get really better. It got a bit worse in some cases. Regarding the Constitution, I read some op-eds and there were some opinions and some intellectuals raised protest around the Constitution, but I haven't seen any serious intention from the side of the Union to somehow raise a voice. The most serious protest, and again, that tells a message that it happened while we were giving the presidency, happened about 3 weeks ago, when the Hungarian government, that's actually related to the new constitution, launched a campaign, an anti-abortion campaign in public transport, in Budapest public transport, where they basically were pushing for the idea of adoption instead of abortion. How this is related to the constitution, it's very simple. In the new constitution, which will become effective from 1st of January, there is a line which says that life begins with conception. According to the Deputy Prime Minister of the country, this is the first step for changing the regulation on abortion. So, few weeks after the adoption of the Constitution, the government launched a campaign, an anti-abortion campaign, which, according to the small letters under the posters, was financed by an anti-discrimination fund of the European Union. Reacting to that, Viviane Reding raised a very strong opinion and declared that Hungary either must repay that support or must explain how and for what intention they use anti-discrimination resources for such a discriminatory campaign. That was the strongest reaction from the side of the Commission. Besides that, maybe I was just too busy with Hungarian issues, but I haven't seen any serious mechanisms or prospect of intervention. But my conclusion is that the government, during the fall, might underestimated the significance of the international attention which can draw by the presidency. At the same time, it might overestimated the organic respect toward a potential president of the EU. To me, for the future, if I think mid-term or long-term, to me the most important element from what I listed is the image, how the country looks like from Brussels and from Western Europe, and the support for the EU and European institutions from Hungarian citizens and taxpayers. In both of these points, I don't think anybody can consider that or 6 months or last 6 months was a success. Thank you very much.